Hello, my book butterflies, and welcome to episode 4 of the Main Chapter podcast. My name's Brianna, and I'm so excited to be sharing this episode with you. I just got done interviewing Lauren Courtney, the author of Up Your Chakras from Medicated to Meditated, and I have such a light energy right now. She was so fun and so informative to talk to. I devoured her book. If you do not know me, I'm a hardcore romance reader, and getting into this memoir nonfiction book was so easy for me, and there were so many times where I was having a lot of aha moments. I think this book is something everyone should read. We're going to talk about chakras and reiki quite a bit, but don't worry if you're new to it like I am, because I'm going to give you a quick crash course so you can follow along with the interview. Also, if you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe so we can keep growing and sharing our love of books with the entire world. I think it's important sharing who Lauren is. She is a chef, the chakra chef, so she gives recipes that are good for healing in our body, but she also has such a fascinating life story. She started out in a career in entertainment and then left that for a career in PR and then left that to be a career in chef and eventually Reiki healing. She had a spiritual awakening after her first love, Jeff, passed away, and she could sense his spirit and communicate with him. And she shares so many interesting stories in her book about sensing energy and sensing spirits. For example, when she was a kid, she talked about how she almost doubled over in a mall once because she could feel all the energies pounding into her. Or after her grandfather passed away, she became super affectionate with her mom, and she realized that it was her grandfather's spirit passing through her, and that's why she was always giving her kisses and hugs. So just really, really cool stuff and a really amazing story. She now lives in Miami where she practices, and she was so easy and nice to talk to, and I'm just smiling now that I've done this interview with her. So I'm really excited that you now all get to witness it as well. So let's go ahead and get into the chakras. You might be asking what chakras are, and they are 7 points along your vertebrae that correspond with different energies, emotions, functions of your life. I have my Kindle here where I'm going to read some notes from the book because I don't have everything memorized just yet, and I want to make sure that I get everything right. So excuse me if I look down some, but we're going to go ahead and start with the root chakra, which is at the base of our spine. So the root chakra deals with physical survival, safety, security, stability, fear, and insecurity. If you have a weak root chakra, you might have a lack of physical energy and vitality. You can feel yourself getting stuck in an unfulfilling or unrewarding career. You're struggling with addiction to substances, sex, shopping, or anything that is suppressing your emotions. You're dependent upon external circumstances for your well-being. You believe that money creates security. You feel scattered, anxious, unstable, or fearful, or you suffer from eating disorders, fatigue, or immune disorders. Next is the sacral chakra, which is located in our hip area, and this deals with feelings of creativity, but also pleasure and sexuality. It kind of comes with the joys of abundance, pleasure, desire. If you have a weak sacral chakra, you might struggle to see yourself as sexy, you feel undesirable, you repress feelings of creativity, you withhold intimacy, you might emotionally isolate yourself. You can feel that you have a lack of control in your life. You find it difficult to open up in relationships, or you might be actively pursuing relationships that you know you are incompatible or aren't good for you, and you're not finding time to explore things romantically. Next is our solar plexus. It is based along our spine, and that is our power center. So it deals a lot with willpower, ambition, action. If you have a weak solar plexus, you might view yourself as powerless or struggle with self-esteem. You feel like a victim, defenseless. You have an overwhelming amount of self-shame and self-doubt. You might have control issues and get upset when things don't go your way. And you can even have an unhealthy gut with digestive issues or bloating. Next is our heart chakra, and as the name suggests, it is located right next to our heart, and it deals with relationships, self-acceptance, deals with issues of love, compassion, belonging, relationships, and inner peace. So if you have a weak heart chakra, you might have difficulty opening up to people in your life, the tendency to self-sabotage relationships, the inability to let a situation rest. You might act clingy or needy or feel anxious in relationships. You can have depression or a lack of self-discipline, those kinds of things. The next is the throat chakra, which was actually my favorite to read about. And as the name suggests, it is in our throat. And this deals with self-expression, honesty, integrity, truth, basically communicating yourself to others. And if you have a weak throat chakra, you might be afraid to speak up and voice your opinion around others, or you can even be an oversharer, especially at inappropriate times. You have trouble finding the words to say how you truly feel. You follow other people's opinions. You can be the quiet one in social or professional circles. You can be shy, withdrawn, or even arrogant, and you have increased anxiety when speaking out. Next is a term that you might be familiar with. I feel like I hear this one all the time on TikTok and social media and pop culture, which is the third eye, and it is centered right on our forehead. And this focuses on intuition, a sense of purpose and direction in life. It also deals with imagination, wisdom, and foresight. It represents your ability to see the big picture and register information beyond the surface. If you have a weak third eye, you might have a feeling of loss when it comes to your sense of purpose in life. You feel indecisive, uncommitted, and unconfident in the decisions you make. You have an overactive imagination and spend much of your day in analytical mode, and you can even have headaches or feelings of tension in your brow area. Finally, there is the crown chakra, which is located on the top of our heads like a crown, and this focuses on our divine connection to a higher power or source like God. And if you have a weakened crown chakra, you can feel that disconnection to a higher power, and you have the feeling of loneliness or insignificance, and you're stuck in an unfulfilling and unrewarding career. Or you can have a strong attachment to possessions and relationships and define yourself by your material possessions. Okay, I know that was a lot, and if you're like me, you might have been reading or listening to that and thinking, oh my gosh, do I have multiple weakened chakras? But don't worry, because Lauren and I do talk about how to heal multiple chakras, how they're all interconnected. If you're a religious person like myself, we do talk about the role of God in the church or wherever your place of worship is. So it's a super interesting and cool conversation, and let's go ahead and cue the interview. My first question to kind of start us all off is, you talked about how this book was a really healing experience writing for you, and that final push for you to finish it was after your grandmother passed away, which I'm so sorry for your loss. And I was wondering, when you were writing and you were kind of healing yourself, what was the main thought going through your mind, what you wanted your future readers to take away?
I think the biggest thing for me is some of the stories that I share, I carried shame for all different reasons. And, once you read the book, you can understand more. But, my ex who, got arrested in my home, I had a lot of shame around that story because I didn't really talk about it when it happened. And I go into detail about how I visited him and all of these things. And I never told anyone because I didn't really feel, now I understand I didn't feel safe to tell anyone because I would have felt more judgment and more shame, and it was already what I was feeling from myself. So it allowed me to go into shame as an emotion that I got to process. And I believe what we heal within ourselves, we can then hold space for others to heal within themselves. So I'd say shame was one of the biggest things that I got to really bring to the surface. That way, when other people read the book, they can feel that transmission of releasing themselves from shame as well.
Right. I have some questions about that story with your ex because that really shocked me. I was not expecting that at all when you said he was coming over for a job interview and then later a officer showed up at your door. But before we get to that, this book took you over 10 years to write. So it was a decade-long journey. So would you say that talking about that particular story or the shame was the hardest part to write of the book, or were there other like components that you really struggled to put together?
Well, so the book, as I mentioned, it really started out as a chakra healing cookbook. That was the direction I thought it would go. And ultimately that changed. And it changed after my grandmother's passing. I had written parts of my story in the initial iteration of the book, but after she passed, I realized like there's a lot I get to share because that's really my purpose in this lifetime. I've learned that through human design and gene keys is I'm here to tell stories and to be a storyteller. So I think the hardest part, the hardest part was trying to wrap my head around. I was writing a cookbook and now I'm writing a memoir. Like, who am I to write a memoir? Is that even like, can I do that? I don't know how to story tell. I don't know how to character things. And then all of a sudden it was like, actually, you do. And sitting down and understanding that I had that ability, and then of course working with an editor to continue to fine tune that, was just such a monumental process for me because I wasn't a big reader growing up. I was more of a, I read all the Roald Dahl books, and anything else was like, okay, let's shove those to the side. I just want to read these like amazing stories about Matilda and James and the Giant Peach. So being able to understand storytelling, because I lived in LA before I moved to Miami, where I live now, and I had this inner knowing that I would end up writing what would be 3 books. And they'd essentially be like Gossip Girl meets Sex in the City kind of energy. And it's funny because after I wrote this book and people read it and they didn't know that was something I had in my mind, they're like, kind of reminds me of Gossip Girl or Sex in the City. And I'm like, cool. So I figured it out. And that inner knowing really came to fruition. But, it took time from what it originated as to become what it was meant to be.
Yeah, and the storytelling was so amazing. I felt that you integrated it really well in between like the information about what chakras are and what healing is. And so I really, really enjoyed getting to know you. Like I felt by the end of the book, I was like, oh, I know this person. And before today, I haven't even like seen her face to face or talked with her. And a really big part of your storytelling was you talking about the passing of your first love, Jeff, and how that kind of led to this spiritual awakening you had. And you describe it kind of being this aha moment. But I was wondering, what were like kind of the emotions running through your head when you were experiencing this and realizing you had these gifts? Was there any fear, or were you just kind of like starting to embrace it?
I really started to embrace it. And I think that's because I felt him so strongly. And at the time I was 32, about to be 33, and I was just like, I don't think you just die and just end up in a box. And that's kind of what I had assumed prior because, I'd only dealt with the death of grandparents and people that were older. And there was only one other time that I felt a spiritual connection after my grandfather passed away, but I kind of just wrote it off.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting because when he passed, I was like, huh, huh, uh-huh. I think there's something no one told me about, and I want to find out what that something is. So I decided to really go down the rabbit hole of exploration in the ways that I felt guided versus being afraid of it because I don't know, I don't think there's anything scarier than losing the love of your life, right?
You're right. I feel like there's so many scary things on Earth that sometimes the afterlife, like, we've already faced a lot on this planet that there can't be anything too scary afterwards.
Exactly.
My aunt is a medium and she can sense a lot of times like our family members when they pass or something bad is about to happen to us, she feels it even though if it's states miles and miles away. So I find it so interesting. And you talked about all these stories when you were experiencing energies and like such as when you were almost peer pressured to smoke a cigarette as a teen and, or when you were in the mall and just feeling all that. And I'm sure you kind of now are used to kind of experiencing different energies and different spirits, but is there a particular story or experience that you had that even shocked you or surprised you after all these years?
I don't I don't know. I feel like I'm always kind of surprised because it's a gift that I'm forever grateful for. Like I was literally 20 minutes ago, I was walking home from seeing a client at this space I use around the corner. And I was like, okay, I need to get grounded. Like I walked for a reason. Let me get grounded. Let me like get in my body. I got to get ready for this interview. And I turned the corner. And as I turned the corner, there was a man that looked exactly like my grandfather.
Oh,
He was wearing like an outfit that was very much like him. And he had this blue newsboy cap on. And you don't see people with
no.
newsboy caps that often. And it was baby blue. and my eyes filled with tears. And I literally almost said to this man, like, Grandpa, and I was like, Lauren, calm down. Your grandfather is dead. But it was so like visceral in my body that I was having a visitation with my grandfather in that moment. I actually like hopped on my Instagram and talked about it after, because for me, it's like we're all able to have these experiences if we're willing to be open. And I never want to get to a place where I take it for granted or don't think that it's special, because it's truly one of the most special gifts that I've ever been granted in this life.
Yeah, it sounds so, so special. And you talked about guides a lot and how you're always like feeling like you're guided or protected by angels. And I feel like I have a similar sense as well. I always say I live in LA, and I feel like driving in LA, I always say that I feel like my grandmother who passed away a few years ago is always protecting me, because I've always had so many, or not so many, but a couple close calls where I was like, I feel like there was someone in my corner, or even just as I'm going through career changes myself, trying to listen to guides and seeing where I'm led. But I know something I struggle with is trying to kind of hear those inner voices. And I know a lot of people struggle with that as well. So, what do you say to people who are kind of struggling to like listen or sense, or what do you think sometimes the main blocks are for people from listening to those guides and spirits?
I mean, I think especially now with the work that I do at the level that I do it, it really comes back to our childhoods. It really comes back to that programming from 0 to 7 years old, the way that we were nurtured, the way that our parents were able to show up for us emotionally. And it doesn't mean we had good parents or bad parents, right? But my parents don't speak the same love languages that I necessarily speak. So because they didn't speak the languages I needed, I never felt safe to express, and I became more emotional. And it was as though, oh, Lauren, you're so emotional. Do you have to be so emotional? It's like, of course I am. I'm a Cancer. I'm a feeler. I feel everything. But my parents are more, in their minds and in their heads, and they're more logical to my I feel I know. So much of it in the work that I do with clients, and even that I talk about in the book, and in the book, I really teach you how to, work with your chakras, heal the energy to recalibrate your energy centers, essentially. And in the work that I do one-on-one with clients or in small groups is more focused on figuring out what is that root trauma, because the subconscious mind and the root chakra are formed at the same time, ages 0 through 7. That's typically what we're needing to go back into. On top of that, there can be things you carried in from past lifetimes. You might have done healing work in a past lifetime and not feel safe to open yourself up and express that in this lifetime because of trauma that you carried in. So, the work I find typically goes back to 7 to 0 to sometimes before this lifetime.
Right. And so one thing you had also talked about is you really go and dive in deep into the chakras, starting at the root, going all the way up to the crown. When I was reading it, there were multiple times where I was like, oh my gosh, do I have this chakra out of alignment? Do I have this chakra out of alignment? Do I have multiple chakras that I need to work on? So people who are reading your book and might feel overwhelmed that there's multiple areas of their body that they need to work on, what would you say in trying to conquer kind of multiple chakras at once, or trying to heal the body in different ways?
Yeah. So it's normal. Like, listen, we're all fucked up. No one is perfect in this world. I have days where this chakra's off, or that chakra's off, or 3 chakras are off. So, like, first and foremost, be in acceptance of that. I think that's the number one thing. Like, it's like, okay, I love and accept myself, even with this that I'm experiencing. That's number one. Number two, a lot of the centers are so directly connected. And we can even think about it, right? The solar plexus. We could think about our gut and gut health and the gut brain connection. So we know through food, right, that the gut and brain axis are directly connected. So you might be having some gut issues. And because of that, your crown chakra is also having an experience where you don't feel connected to source, because, right, we're having a disconnect here. So if you're, instead of focusing on what do I need to eat, what would make my gut better, let me listen, let me breathe, let me do meditation, let me try a breath of fire, let me do some breath work, right? That's going to access the gut. the sacral chakra and the throat chakra are also really connected. And when we look at the physical body, the hips are a mirror in the lower body for the jaw in the upper body. So if there's tightness going on in the hips, there's probably some clenching and tightness going on in the jaw. So we're locking up our voice. We're also locking up our creative center. So I think just knowing like as above, so below, and we've got the upper triangle and the lower triangle and the heart being the center. If we can focus on my belief, if we could focus on our heart, right? If we could focus on love, if we could focus on our root and understanding like, okay, I want to find safety and security in my body, we can start to heal all of these other areas. And I really do believe so much of it starts with how can I love myself in spite of X, Y, or Z?
Right. I love how you mentioned that they're all interconnected. And you mentioned the crown chakra, which I actually had a question about because you talk about how the crown chakra is kind of our connection to the divine and a higher power. And I am Christian, and one thing that I hear a lot are people in the church saying that like reiki, chakras, that doesn't belong in Christianity. And I know a lot of religions feel the same way. I think they can coexist. And I was like wondering kind of what your take is on like Reiki and chakras existing with religion and what would you say to religious people who might think otherwise?
So I've actually heard of priests and rabbis that also practice Reiki and bring it into their churches, into their temples. So that is number one. I do want to mention that.
Yeah.
Number two, my belief is God gave us these tools. God gave us these tools. The Reiki that I've been trained in is called Holy Fire. And Holy Fire Reiki is said to have been brought down to earth by Jesus and the ascended masters at this time so we could become our own greatest healers. So knowing that I work directly with Jesus and I grew up in a household that my background is Jewish. So I had no ties really to Jesus. I had no like fears around God, thankfully, but I didn't grow up with God really in my life outside of the high holidays and when I would go to temple and being bat mitzvahed. But what's interesting is when I started teaching Reiki to other people, I had a lot of people who grew up in the Catholic Church that started coming to me. And the reason they said they started coming to me, and this happened on multiple occasions, is because they loved how I talked about God and Jesus. Because I talked about God and Jesus from a non-religious state. Because it's my belief that religion has taken these terms and it's created separation. So I think it's for everyone to check in with themselves. Like, hey, what is my belief around God? What is my belief around Jesus? What is my belief around healing? Not what did my mom teach me? What did my dad teach me? What did I learn when I went through, whatever the things are that you go through? Like, it's not about what anyone else said, because that then we're going into religious trauma, projections, what has been placed onto you. Because if you were in school, right, and a teacher said to you, you're learning math as a kid, and you were like 5 plus 5 is 10, and they were like, no, it's 12, and you were like, no, it's 10, and they were like, no, it's 12, like you're gonna get a 0 on this test, and then you go through life thinking 5 plus 5, nope, it's 12. That's incorrect, right? But now you've had that projection placed onto you that this is the answer, and it's like, well, no, I actually have a belief that there is another answer. So I really believe that we get to choose our relationship with God, with Source, with our angels, with our guides, with our loved ones outside of what anyone else has told you. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong or they're right, because there might be some parts that you love and you want to hold on to, and there might be other parts that you're like, you know what, this doesn't resonate for me. I love that for you, and I respect it for you, and I respect this for me.
Yeah. I love that because I feel like the biggest Christian teaching I love is just kind of planting seeds of love. And it really hurts my heart when I see like people use like Christianity as forms of like judgment or telling people they're right or wrong. Because I always say that like people's like relationship with like God, a higher power, is personal. And like we can only worry about like our relationship with them and just hope that we plant seeds and spread love. So I really love that message that you shared. Kind of changing gears a bit. I know one of the main things, or not one of the main things, but something you talked about in your book, it kind of was your relationship to food, body dysmorphia, and that was something I also kind of resonated with and found really interesting. And we are living in a period where people are saying, oh, skinny is in again. And being an entertainment journalist, I was always tracking Ozempic and GLP-1 weight loss drugs and their role in Hollywood. And I was wondering kind of with this new like body state that we're in, if you've seen that kind of come up in the work you've done and how that's impacted your clients.
I mean, I wouldn't say I have it directly come up, but I do. My background prior to doing this work was as a health coach and private chef. So I definitely see the trends, have tracked it myself. And I'm 42 now, so it's really in to eat a lot of protein. I think what it comes down to is what is correct for you. Just like religion, right? Like, what is correct for you outside of what anyone else is telling you? Because, especially with social media, right? You start following someone, oh, I have to eat this exact diet. I have to eat this exact diet. Well, personally, I struggled with foods that created inflammation. I had to do a low food mop diet because I had a tongue tie, and because of my tongue tie, I would have inflammation. But inflammation foods that are on the food map diet: strawberries, avocado, spinach, right? So if I was following someone and she's like, I eat 4 cups of spinach a day and I eat 14 strawberries and you're going to lose 10 pounds in no time, I'm actually going to become inflamed.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is tuning into your intuition, not what works for person A or what works for person B, because you are over here person C and you have your own body composition, your own energy centers, your own things that you need to feel into. And one way doesn't work just because it works for someone else. And that's why even the recipes I share in the book, it's like eat for your intuition. Not intuitive eating, not intuitive eating, but like eating for your actual intuition. So if I'm like, okay, today I have this meeting, I want to be able to like really speak, I want to be able to use my voice and stand in my power. Okay, I'm going to eat foods that fuel my throat chakra and my solar plexus. So I'm standing in my power and using my voice. Okay, I want to be grounded too. Okay, I'm going to add some foods that are going to be rooting and grounding. There might be days where I say, you know what, I really want to connect to God and source today. And I'm going to fill myself with more light and connect more with my crown chakra and less food. And so that's really where I stand with food, is figure out what works for you and stop hopping on the train of everything else, because it just creates more noise, more confusion, more chaos. I understand also the need for some medications in certain standpoints. I have had a family member who needed gastric bypass surgery. So I also understand the needs for these things. With that said, I also believe, would you need this thing had you had earlier dealt with what was going on at a root level and the trauma that caused you to get to the place where now you're seeking medication for whatever reason?
Right. Right. I love that advice. And I wish people would kind of explore different routes rather than kind of looking for this one size fits all or something magic. We mentioned your ex-boyfriend in the beginning of the interview, Jake, and I said we would kind of come back to him and we were talking about his story. And I was wondering, kind of with all this advice you're giving, if you have any specific advice for people when it's time to cut out relationships, whether they're romantic or platonic, because that's something you had to do after just kind of blocking him after he didn't pay you back $100.
Um, The cheapest way I could have gotten out of that.
Yeah.
But the truth is, and I've had to do it recently where I realized friendships simply weren't going to serve me as I continue to ascend. So I like to look at the fact that we came into this life with purpose. We came into this life with a purpose. That purpose will continuously evolve as we continue to evolve. So ask yourself, am I staying in a cycle? Am I staying in a loop? Is this serving the highest good? Or am I living in anxiety? Am I living in fear? Am I living in low frequency emotions? If you find that you're living in low frequency emotions, get clear on the people around you, because we are a composite of the four people closest to us. So you want the people around you lifting you up. And if they're not, then you're stuck in a cage, right? There's this saying, like, if your circle is not expanding you, like you're stuck in a cage or something like that. Like, anyway, but that's the truth. And sometimes it can feel hard to leave a relationship, friendships, like romantic relationships. And my biggest advice for you is do it anyway. Do it anyway. You may feel lonely. What a gift. What a gift to have time to be alone. Because in your loneliness, you actually figure out who you are. And it may take time. It might not be a week. It might not be a month. It might take a year. It might take 2 years. Give yourself the space to find out who you are and why you actually came to the earth at this time. Because if you are going through a lot of heartbreak or negativity or shitty relationships, like I talk about it all in the book, right? I went through a lot. And I believe it's because I really karmically front loaded this lifetime so I could go through it all to become the teacher that I am in this lifetime, having been through all of what I needed to go through. And it doesn't mean that I won't have more lessons and learnings as I continue to ascend. And for those of us that have a lot of karmic load and a lot of pain at the beginning, I guarantee it's because you have a really big purpose in this lifetime.
Yeah, I love that. So I have a couple of questions left for you. We are filming this on Lunar New Year, and it is the year of the fire horse, which is all about rapid movement forward, decision making. Is there anything we can do for our chakras to kind of prepare us for this next upcoming year of the horse?
I think the biggest, the what's coming through right now as you're asking me that is focusing on your solar plexus, your power center, focusing on your gut, really learning who you are, learning like my gut reactions. And if we look into human design, everyone's a little different. There's sacral authority, there's inner authority, there's all different authorities. And at the beginning and end of the day, it's like, what is your gut reaction? Because we know. We innately know what we need. And if someone's listening to this, they're like, I don't know. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You're choosing to stay in a place that's like, I don't know. And that's you playing small and like cowering. And it's like a gut punch, right? Every time you're like, I don't know, you're punching yourself in the gut. So instead of, going inward, go outward. Go outward. Shine your light this year. Even if that means people aren't going to understand you. Even if it means people are going to question you. Even if it means you may lose people in your life. Good. As my grandmother would say in Yiddish, Gegas into hate. Go with God. Get out of my energy. Get out of my space. If I am too powerful for you, that's not my fucking problem.
I love that. I feel like I really needed to hear that. So thank you for that message. And so my last question is, you shared earlier that this was kind of, you had like this feeling that you were going to write 3 books. So what are your plans for these next potential books? Are they going to be more cookbook based, or do you think you're going to write some more memoirs?
I think both, honestly. I think there's a little bit of both. And then it might just be that every book there's an element of cooking that comes along with it. But it's kind of like I know what wants to be born next is kind of what happened after Glow Up Your Chakras and really what I've been living through. I finished writing Glow Up Your Chakras oh God, I'm like, what month, what year is this? But like, what day, all of the things. But I finished writing it like a little over a year ago, and it's been out since May of 2025. So I've been living a whole new book since the book came out. And that's really a story going deeper into healing, more, chakra based, but going into nervous system regulation, understanding fight and flight, and all of these next chapters and things that I've gotten to work through and storytell in my own life.
I love that. Well, I am excited for whatever you come out with next. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Lauren. Be sure to keep up with all her updates about her books or what else she is doing with her life. I know I will, and I hope you have a great week, my book butterflies.